Hello everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about the Old West and the American Dream. I'm going to start at the beginning and then roll through the Jeffersons, talk a little bit about Emerson and Thoreau, and then talk about the media and its part in today's agriculture. To begin with, I'm going to quiz you on myths or falsehoods of agriculture and just what you might think. I just want to hear from you guys. So, myth number one. Thomas Jefferson is considered the patron saint of American agriculture. Now I just want you to tell me if that's true or false. Think about the past, think about our presidents, and just ponder that for a second. Alright, myth number two. Do you think in the 18th and 19th century, farming was a mundane and degrading task? So think about farming in the 1800s. Think about whether people saw that as a degrading task or a very important task. And wasted none of the crops and animals. Now I'm not talking about Native Americans when you think of them using all of like a bison perhaps. I'm talking about when farmers were harvesting their crops or animals, and then when consumers were cooking their food, did they use every piece? Myth number 4. City folk knew nothing about agriculture. Myth number 5. The shift to and through the Midwest was driven by agriculture. Now, myth number 6, we're going to switch it up. Instead of driven by agriculture, we're going to say agriculture drove the shift to and through the Midwest. So, again, number 5, the shift to and through the Midwest was driven by agriculture. Myth number 6, it drove agriculture. Myth number 6, ghost towns were created by mass amounts of sickness and death. Myth number 8, philosophers such as Emerson and Thoreau played a role in the ideals of modern and past agriculture. Myth number 9, the USDA was formed for science, research, and seed distribution. Number 7, John Wayne was a real cowboy. Thus begins the evolution of American agriculture. I'm going to skip ahead to America in the 1800s. The indigenous people have cultivated some crops and created some efficient societies, and new colonists have moved in and created a new nation on the East Coast. I'm going to start with Thomas Jefferson, who, yes, is the patron saint of agriculture. Jefferson enjoyed life on the farm just as much as any American in the 1800s. He encouraged family farms and believed in the right to own land. He also believed that that right is one of the most important. Jefferson battled government ideologies between state rights and federal rights. He believed that the state shouldn't have too much control over the individual, but definitely the feds should not have control over the state or individual. He advocated for state rights and individual farmers' voice. Jefferson believed that the role of property is the economic security for a democracy. It is because of Jefferson that many ideals of the classic agrarianism lifestyle have appeared today and still exist. The ideals of property ownership being right, family farms, and that there is power in farming. If a country can sustain itself, it will survive. Farming was very, very important in the early 1800s, as of today, but farming back then wasn't making one crop for an entire nation. It was making many crops for a family, maybe for a small town. So in that importance of a farmer, we kind of move on to the ideology, the classic agrarianism that I talked about earlier. Thomas Jefferson was the lead on that. However, a lot of philosophers thought that farming brought a man closer to God. So farming was revered as the most important career. It was working the land, providing food for families, and most of all, hard labor. Hard labor made men a man. Farms in the 1800s were usually very small, and one farmer was raising crops for just his family, or maybe a small market in town. Working the land was a very important and highly recognized job. Farmers are not as dirty and uncivilized as one might think looking back on history. Yes, it was very hard work and intense labor, but the farmers were still a huge part in the structure of a town. Farming in the 1800s was revered as one of the most important careers because working the land brought a man closer to God. The time farmers spent doing hard labor and spending time in the fields gave them time to reflect on their lives and spend time in their own thoughts, giving them time to be close with God. Now let's bring technology into the mix. Technology such as tractors actually made farming less rewarding of a career because there was now less physical labor and less time in the fields. Therefore, less time to think about life and about God. In the 1800s, it is also often thought that farmers used every piece of their crop and wasted nothing. However, in the early stages of American farming, efficiency was not a strong suit. Crops were not harvested correctly, leaving products in the field left to decay. Farmers' lack of knowledge often created waste by the harvesters throwing out good products, and standards were not always up to par. So technology actually decreased the waste of food products. Now let's talk about city folk. It is often assumed that city people knew nothing about agriculture, but really, in order to survive, everyone, no matter their location, knew something about cultivating their own food. In fact, as farms began to grow into operations, less laborers were needed on the farm, so those workers started moving into towns and then into cities. With that in mind, most people knew at least a little when it came to raising food or livestock. Regarding the movement of workers, now let's consider the shift to the Midwest and the beginning of the Old West. Agriculturists seeking land to expand their farms and operations began to move out west, where land was cheap and plentiful. What they didn't know was how hard it was going to be to farm such dry climates in the fields of Oklahoma and Nebraska. Specialization began to occur, and many farmers began to go bankrupt and move to towns, shifting populations more and more westward. That movement of populations often created ghost towns. No, ghost towns were not usually caused by some freak amount of deaths. People just simply shifted. They moved away until an economy became impossible. Without farmers, there was no grocery store to run. Without kids, there was no school and no way of providing tax money. Without tax money, there was no maintenance or building opportunities for the town, and eventually it just closed down. Moving back to agricultural philosophies, Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau were great philosophers and poets of the 19th century. Many don't see a connection in writing, philosophy, and agriculture. However, the writings of these philosophers has helped shape many ideals of the American life on a farm. They highlighted the romanticism and the close to godliness of farming, and encouraged many of the ideals facing farming today. The two praised agriculture and hated the progression of industry and technology. Leaning towards the government side of agriculture, many people see the USDA as some big government entity that doesn't help much. All they do is set rules and no one follows. While that is not all true, let's look back when it first began. The USDA was put into the works in the 1830s. The department goal was the advancement of science and research, but mainly to oversee distribution of plant seeds across the United States. Skipping another big chunk of history, I'm going to jump ahead to the misconceptions in the 1960s. The American cowboy. There is so much I could talk about concerning the likeness of the American cowboy, but I will just skip ahead to the fact that it's very, very romanticized. With the movie franchise in full swing, John Wayne emerged with his crooked smile and his cowboy hat, his voice unforgettable, and this actor stole the hearts of Americans everywhere. The Old West will forever be in his version, and not so much the true hardships of the farmer and rancher.
You ask me why I love her? Well, give me time. I'll explain. You seen a Kansas sunset or an Arizona rain? Have you drifted on a bayou down Louisiana way? Have you watched the cold fog drifting over San Francisco Bay? Have you heard a Bob White calling in the Carolina pines, or heard the bellow of a diesel at the Appalachia mines? Does the call of the Niagara thrill you when you hear her waters roar? You look with awe and wonder at her Massachusetts shore, where men who braved a hard new world first stepped on Plymouth's rock. Do you think of them when you stroll along a New York City dock? Have you seen a snowflake drifting in the Rockies way up high? Have you seen the sun come blazing down from a bright Nevada sky? You hail to the Columbia as she rushes to the sea, or bow your head at Gettysburg, our struggle to be free? Have you seen the mighty Tetons? You watched an eagle soar? Have you seen the Mississippi roll along Missouri's shore? Have you felt a chill at Michigan when on a winter's day her waters rage along the shore in thunderous display? Does the word aloha make you warm? Do you stare in disbelief when you see the surf come roaring in at Waimea Reef? From Alaska's cold to the Everglades, from the Rio Grande to Maine, my heart cries out, my pulse runs fast, the might of her domain. You ask me why I love her? I've a million reasons why. My beautiful America, beneath God's wide, wide sky.